Hey, I'm Emma Garlett, and on today's episode of It Blak, I'll be weighing in on the January 26 debate. I'll also try and help give you some tips on how you can have difficult conversations that might arise if you don't want to celebrate January 26. Now, before I get started, I'll be talking about some themes that might be upsetting or triggering to some, so please take care while watching. And I know this is a sensitive topic, so remember, if you're going to comment, please be kind. Now join me as I paint it black. Okay, so I want you to picture a quintessential Australia Day. A lot might imagine barbecues, citizenship ceremonies, beaches packed full of people, and fireworks on January 26. But for a lot of the people, that's not the case. They'll be reflecting on what the day means. It's marketed as a day to bring all Australians together, people from all over the world who call themselves Australian. But for the very first Australians, it's not a day of inclusion or celebration. Now, to those watching this who might feel the need to say something like, blah, 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 changing the date comes up every year, or it's just time we accept it, mostly on social media, I want you to think about why the conversation about the date keeps coming up every year. It must be pretty important to the people negatively impacted by January 26. I heard a really good analogy about the date a few years back. I was told to think of it as if someone broke into your home, destroyed some of your precious belongings, stole from you, and overall traumatised you. Then, every year on that date, they come back to your house and have a party about it. You'd be pretty mad, pretty upset about people partying over your trauma, right? You could see that this is how some people feel about January 26, the day that marked the start of a lot of trauma for First Nations people. You might have seen on social media or people wearing clothes saying they're not the date to celebrate. It's a day that's been marketed as a day to bring all Australians together. But for many First Nations people, it's isolating, cruel and triggering. The grassroots campaigns and calls to raise public awareness of the problems with Australia Day have been getting louder over the years. And this year in particular, one organisation has taken the conversation one step further. This year, fashion brand and Aboriginal-owned not-for-profit Clothing the Gap has posed a new question. The question has come about through conversations and consultation with First Nations communities around Australia about how January 26 or Australia Day can be framed. They are change the date, abolish the date, or rename and reframe the date. Those who want to change the date, it's pretty self-explanatory. For many people, January 26 is painful for First Nations people and marks the beginning of genocide and invasion. Change the Date advocates that Australia Day should be for all Australians, and if we change the date, we can create an inclusive national holiday for people in this country. Abolish the date. Clothing the Gap said those who support Abolish Australia Day advocate that the day should be removed altogether. To supporters, simply changing the date only seeks to entrench Australian nationalism. Changing the date without action and treaty only moves the celebration of unfinished business to another date. And finally, out of a lack of action from the government and ignorance from some of the public, the thought to rename and reframe the date has formed. Supporters believe renaming Australia Day by referring to it as Invasion Day, Survival Day, or a day of mourning centres First Nations people in the conversation and acknowledges the ongoing pain and trauma of colonisation. Already, we are seeing a public shift with sporting codes, businesses and local councils no longer recognising Jan 26 as Australia Day, nor a day to celebrate, with the hashtag not a date to celebrate trending throughout the year. So where do you sit on this debate? If you want more information on the debate, I urge you to check out Clothing the Gap on Instagram or on their website. They have some really in-depth and well-researched information. I'll post a link to them in the description. Now, I understand if you make it public that you don't want to celebrate January 26, some difficult conversations might arise. Whether you're a First Nations person or an ally, these conversations might be hurtful, confrontational, or even angry. Reach Out, an online mental health service, has put together some tips on how to have conversations around Australia Day and some strategies if it all becomes too overwhelming. Some of their strategies include to attend or volunteer at an Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander festival, start a conversation with a trusted friend on the topic. If you're struggling with your mental health, you can call Lifeline on 13 11 14 or contact 13 Yarn, that's 13 92 76. Take time to connect with friends and family, connect to culture, switch off from social media, or even simply change the topic. For more information, head to the Reach Out website. I'll post a link in the description. While you think about what January 26 means for you, let's have a look at how we got here. Like I mentioned earlier, on January 26, 1788, the First Fleet landed in Australia, led by Captain Arthur Phillip. That marked the beginning of European settlement on the soil that was home to Indigenous people for more than 60,000 years. The day was also known as Foundation Day and First Landing Day until 1935, when all Australian states and territories used the name Australia Day to mark January 26. But Australia Day was not consistently celebrated as a public holiday across Australia on the specific day of January 26 until 1994. And this has been an argument against the sticking point amongst most people who want to keep the date. Now, the date is also referred by many First Nations people as Invasion Day, Survival Day, or a day of mourning. As for many, it symbolises a loss of sovereignty and the loss of culture. As much as January 26 is celebrated by the community, it's also a day of dread and sadness. And I think it's important we as a country, from everyday people to our top politicians, recognise that. On December 16 last year, the federal government announced changes to the Australian Citizenship Ceremonies Code to give Australian councils an option to host their ceremonies 3 days either side of Australia Day instead of on the day itself. The City of Vincent and the town of Cambridge have changed the date of their Australian Day citizenship ceremonies. Vincent's ceremony, which is usually held on January 26, has been moved to the following day, while Cambridge has moved its Citizenship Day to January 25th. Despite refusing to hold celebrations on January 26 for the past 6 years, the City of Fremantle will still hold a citizenship ceremony on the public holiday. However, there won't be any kinds of celebrations in Fremantle. Fremantle's annual one-day event will go ahead on January 28th at the Woyullup Court, featuring Thomas Mayo, a leading advocate for First Nations voice to Parliament. He has travelled the country since 2017, campaigning for the Statement from the Heart. And all over the country, instead of celebrations on January 26, there will be protests and rallies. In WA, the protests will be held in the Supreme Court Gardens with the It Blak concert. The Perth Invasion Day rally will be held at Forest Chase. There will be a music video filmed at Langley Park. And in Broome, the annual Rabibi Survival Day event will be held at the Gimme Club. And finally, some businesses are giving employees the option to work on the public holiday. Late last year, the Albanese government announced it will allow public service workers to substitute the Australia Day public holiday for another day if employees choose to work on January 26. But the coalition accused the government of an attempt to deliberately undermine Australia Day, calling on the Prime Minister to reverse the decision. As well as that, a number of private companies are also allowing workers to work on Australia Day in exchange for another day off. Some of the companies include Woolworths, Kmart, Telstra, Deloitte and CSL. The National Tertiary Education Union is one of few unions advocating for staff to be given the option to work, with the deputy head of the ACTU, Scott Connolly, arguing that the movement was looking forward to the national conversation on The Voice later this year. So as you can see, a few changes are slowly being made. But for Australia Day to mean something positive for all Australians, we need to acknowledge the pain caused to First Nations people, hear their voices and do something meaningful to include them in the conversation and take action to start healing. One day, I hope for an Australia Day where we can all be proud to celebrate this beautiful country we call home. Thanks for watching Paint It Black with me, Emma Garlett. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode.